The Committee on Elections will come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Busey,
Here.
Rep Burrows,
Here.
Rep Capriglione,
Here.
Rep Deala, Rep Manuel, Rep Morales, Rep Swanson, Rep Vo.
Here.
A quorum is present.
All right, a quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone present wishing to testify before the committee, please register at the kiosk located in the hallways behind the hearing rooms. If you require assistance in registering or testifying, please contact the committee staff. Due to the number of witnesses who have registered and to accommodate all who wish to testify, there will be a time limit of 2 minutes. You can do it. 2 minutes per witness during the public testimony period. Committee members, as a reminder, please remember to check out the publicly available comments. These comments are left by the public on each agenda item in our hearings. Comments are open until the end of the hearing and are posted upon adjournment from our hearing. We need to correct our minutes. And at this point, the chair moves to correct the minutes for the meeting held on April 12th. Is there any objection? The chair hears none and the motion prevails. Members, we're now going to vote out several bills which we have heard in previous hearings. The chair lays out HB 3159 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we've heard previously relating to the use of an accessible absentee mail system by certain voters. Representative Day Ayala offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 3159 by Leach, as substituted, be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep Burrows,
Aye.
Rep Capriglione, Rep Deala, Rep Manuel, Rep Morales, Rep Swanson, Rep Vo. We got 8.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 4780 by Smith as pending business. Members, this is the bill we've heard previously relating to ballots voted by mail. Chairman Capriglione offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 4780 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed, and the clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep Burrows,
Aye.
Rep Capriglione,
Aye.
Rep Deala, Rep Manuel, Rep Morales, Rep Swanson, Rep Vo. 8.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 824 by Buckley as pending business. Members, this is the bill we've heard previously relating to authorizing certain political subdivisions to change the date on which the general election for officers is held. Representative Swanson offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 824 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep Burrows,
Aye.
Rep Capriglione,
Aye.
Rep Deala, Rep Manuel, Rep Morales, Rep Swanson, Rep Vo. 8.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 5331 by Murr as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to authorizing certain cities to change the date on which their general election for officers is held. The chair moves that HB 5331 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Rep Burrows.
Aye.
Rep Capriglione.
Aye.
Rep Deola.
Aye.
Rep Manuel. Rep Morales. Rep Swanson. Rep Bo. 8.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 1208 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously by Guillen relating to the reading and marking of a ballot by a person occupying a voting station or by the person's child. Representative Swanson offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 1208 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye?
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Rep Burrows.
Aye.
Rep Capriglione. Rep Deola. Rep Manuel. Rep Morales. Rep Swanson. Rep Bo.
Aye.
8.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 2626 by Tepper as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the availability on the internet of reports of political contributions or expenditures filed in connection with certain offices. Representative Morales offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 2626 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Rep Burrows.
Aye.
Rep Capriglione.
Aye.
Rep Deola. Rep Manuel. Rep Morales. Rep Swanson. Rep Bo. 8.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 1356 as pending business by Morales Shaw. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the documentation proof of identification.
Sorry.
Is that you? Okay.
I think it was me.
That's all right. We're going to lay out HB 1356 as pending business. This is the bill we heard previously relating to the documentation proof of identification for voting. The chair moves that HB 1356 without amendments be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. And be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye?
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Rep Burrows.
Aye.
Capriglione. Deola.
Okay, what's not going to happen?
It goes automatically to general.
Does it? Okay.
Manuel. Morales. Swanson. Bo.
Aye.
7, 1 nay.
There being 7 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 4697 by De Ayala as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the audit of an election in certain counties. Representative Capriglione offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 4697 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Smith.
Aye.
Busey.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Capriglione. Deola.
Aye.
Manuel. Morales. Swanson. Bo.
Aye.
There being 8 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out. The chair lays out HB 1243 by Hefner as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the penalty for the offense of illegal voting, increasing a criminal penalty. The chair moves that HB 1243 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Smith.
Aye?
Busey.
No.
Burrows.
Aye.
Capriglione.
Aye.
Deola.
Aye.
Manuel. Morales.
No.
Swanson. Bo.
No.
5.
There being 5 ayes
Three
and 3
nays.
nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 5180.
I keep hitting it with
Is
my
that what it
paper.
is?
Yeah.
I'll move that over there. All right. chair lays out HB 5180 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the disclosure of anonymous voted ballots under the Public Information Law by Wilson. Representative Swanson offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 5180 is substituted, be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Smith.
Aye?
Busey.
Aye.
Burrows. Capriglione. Deola. Manuel. Morales. Swanson.
Yes, absolutely.
Eight.
There being 8 emphatic ayes and no nays, the motion prevails.
I'll pass it to them.
There we go. You ready? All right. The chair lays out House Bill 2809 and recognizes Representative Jaton to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I'm here to lay out House Bill 2809. Texas currently participates in a voter registration cross-check program known as ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. The program is designed to ensure individuals registered to vote in one state are not also registered to vote in another state. However, some Texans have voiced concerns that participation in ERIC requires higher financial burden than warranted and does not provide sufficient information from other states while potentially sharing too much information about Texas voters with other states. House Bill 2809 ensures adequate guardrails to ensure we are receiving pertinent information and only sharing information that is necessary for the identification of voters. Additionally, the bill ensures we are getting adequate return on investment by placing limits on startup costs and ongoing fees. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I reserve the right to close.
Members, any questions of the representative? Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The chair calls Andrew Eller.
I believe I had registered to not testify on that one.
Hold on just one second.
But it says testifying.
Okay, well then I'll testify.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
No, I will do it then.
Okay,
And it will be less than 2 minutes, but
So you are Andrew Eller, who you're here on behalf of the State Republican Executive Committee, SD 24, and yourself, and you're also here on behalf of the Republican Party of Texas, and you're for the bill. Is that all correct?
yes, that is correct.
Go ahead.
Yes, the ERIC system does provide personal identifiable information, especially from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and it does create problems, especially for those who are age 16 to 18, who are actually underage, and that information is being sold to third parties outside of ERIC. So it is not just a interstate cross-check system to prevent voters from being registered in multiple states. It is actually providing information on individuals that should not be provided outside of the voter registration systems. So this bill would actually allow us to look at other systems. I do know that the Secretary of State is currently looking at its own system for the state of Texas, and there are multiple states that are looking to go in with us. In addition, at least 6 states have removed themselves from ERIC in the last several months because of problems with it, and I just ask that you do pass this bill through. Thank you.
Members, any questions of the witness? Thank you. The chair calls Christina Atkins. Morning, Ms. Atkins.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. I understand you're here on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State's office and that you're neutral on the bill, here to serve as a resource witness for us. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That's all correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Members, any questions? Vice Chair Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Adkins. I have a few questions about ERIC and the system. For the calendar year 2022, how many people did ERIC identify from Texas that moved between participating states? Do you have that information?
I do have some data available. I can give you some broad information. The numbers that I have in front of me are to date what we've received from ERIC, so it's hard for me to break it up into different categories because during 2022, there was a lot of data that was pushed out to us, but because of federal law and restrictions on when we can do certain types of list maintenance activities, some of that data was held and then provided to the counties a little bit later.
Okay.
But I can tell you to date.
From when we
that-
started with ERIC or in the last?
No, I
In
believe-
2022?
Right, correct.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
Yes. Well, no, I'm sorry. These are total records to date that we've received since we started participating in ERIC. That's what I have in front of me.
Okay,
If you
that's
want just
fine.
2022 numbers, I can get you those.
No, that will be helpful.
Okay. So to date, we have received approximately 4.2 million records from ERIC. Of those records, we've pushed out about 900,000 matches to the counties so that they can investigate those matches and do what we need to do to determine whether those individuals should be canceled.
What are we doing when we get that data? What is the purpose of those matches?
So when we get matches from ERIC, and I know that there's somebody here from ERIC that can answer probably more questions on their process on the back end, but essentially it's records from our voter registration system, from DPS, which is what our equivalent DMV agency is. They receive that data. There's a comparison process that occurs between what we have and what the other states provide. And then they identify certain records, certain categories of records that they provide to the state. We apply our state matching criteria because we have stricter matching criteria than ERIC has with the matches they provide to us. And then the ones that meet our state matching criteria are provided to the counties. Those counties then investigate those records and then determine at that point whether or not a cancellation should occur.
Were these data points being available to y'all or monitored before you joined ERIC, before the state of Texas joined ERIC?
I didn't.
How were we getting these data points before we joined ERIC, or were we?
Sure. For some of them, we were. There's a large number of list maintenance categories in the Texas Election Code that exist outside of ERIC. ERIC does provide some data that we don't get from other sources right now. But for example, when we look at deceased records, we get records from the local death registers, the clerks of courts, the Bureau of Vital Statistics. Those are pushed out actually more frequently than the data that we get from ERIC because of changes made during the last session. I think it was a bill that went through this committee. That timeline for some of those reporting mechanisms was changed from, I believe, 30 days to 7 days. And so we get them a lot more frequently. So we do get, for example, deceased records from ERIC, but oftentimes those matches have already been handled by the local records that we get. There are data points from ERIC that we do get that we don't get from another source, just to make sure everyone's clear on that. While we do get some things with our own process and our own state laws, there are data points there that we get from ERIC that are exclusive to ERIC. Specifically, our cross-state movers, people that move in and out of Texas, is something that we get through ERIC. Voter participation, what individuals may have voted in multiple states.
Why is it important to get cross-state movers? Why are we getting it?
Well, Texas is a large state, and because of our economy, I think that results in a lot of people moving in and out of Texas. And so it's important to get that information because we want our voter registration list to be accurate.
So getting this data from ERIC helps our voter lists be more accurate?
Yes, I would say getting these matches, pushing them out to the counties so that they can do their investigations could result in an individual being canceled that is already registered in another state.
To lead to more accurate data. We've heard, I've seen kind of chatter around on social media about ERIC. Does the SOS have any current concerns around data security and transparency with working with ERIC?
I think we're always going to be concerned about security no matter what. When we're talking about our voter data, we need to make sure that it's as protected as it possibly can be. And, I think the individual that's here from ERIC can probably speak to you more about their security measures that are in place. But no matter what program we participate in, data security is going to be a high priority for us.
Absolutely, but y'all haven't had any major concerns come up?
At this point, I'm not aware of any issues that may have come up with respect to the security component to ERIC.
Let me ask you, under current Texas law, doesn't the Texas Secretary of State already have the authority to pull Texas out of ERIC whenever they wish?
That's a good question. So if we make the decision to pull out of ERIC on our own, we would be violating a provision in Texas law. This particular bill, HB 2809, is amending Section 18062 of the Election Code. 18062 of the Election Code requires that we participate in some kind of interstate cross-check programs, something like that, where we do some kind of data comparison. This has actually been on the books for quite some time. It wasn't until, I believe it was 2 sessions ago in 2019, that we actually got funding to participate in ERIC. So the requirement was there. We couldn't participate because of the costs associated with it. There was a budget rider for ERIC, specifically targeting ERIC. I mean, it names ERIC in there as giving us funding to participate. So we have the funding, and we have a requirement on the books that we do something to participate in some kind of cross-check or some kind of data matching program.
Are there any other currently operating systems like ERIC that are multi-state that are currently available and operating right now?
Sure. So that's a good question. So there are other sources of data that we're looking at right now, for example, looking at NCOA data, National Change of Address information. So there's other things that are independent that we're looking at that don't rely on other states' data. So we're looking right now at how we can go ahead and do some of the things that are required here in this bill without relying on participation from other states. Beyond that, because of some of the issues with ERIC and some of the concerns that some of the member states have articulated that have resulted in states pulling out of ERIC, there are a good handful of states that are looking to put together alternatives.
But they're not available right now. They're
At the
exploring
current
them.
moment, no, but I would not be surprised to see some of those up and running a lot more quickly than people realize.
Sure. But if we jumped out today, we wouldn't have an option tomorrow.
That's correct. That's correct. And just to clarify with this bill, I don't see this bill as requiring that we pull out of ERIC
Sure.
immediately. It doesn't do that. What it does do is it puts parameters in place that, what I would say is it puts an expiration date on our participation in ERIC. So I think under the bill as written, we could participate for probably 1 more year. And then at that point, some of the other provisions would kick in that would make it so that we cannot participate because ERIC would be requiring us to do things that are not authorized by state law. And so at that point, we would have to have an alternative.
And you say we would have to have an alternative, one, because required by state law, but also the data that we get, you highlighted a little bit. I just want to, kind of my last point here is we get information from other states when somebody dies in another state, when they come across. This data sharing helps. What is the purpose of the tool in a nutshell?
Well, we want to have a robust list maintenance program in Texas. I think with our current laws now, outside of our participation in ERIC, we have a very strong list maintenance program. I think that we probably have one of the strongest ones in the country. ERIC is one tool in the toolbox to keep that our voter registration list accurate and up to date. So yes, we would definitely want to have some kind of alternative and find some other ways to obtain this data because that's an important part of keeping your elections.
So ERIC is a tool that we use to have better, more accurate list maintenance.
I would say it's one of the tools that we have.
Absolutely.
We've got a pretty hefty toolbox just based on state law alone, but it is one tool that we have.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chairman Capriglio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we say data, what is the data that is being, I guess, received from ERIC? Obviously, address, name, driver's license information.
Yes, there's specific data points that we receive, and excuse me, there's specific data points that they match on, and they identify those matches for us, and then they tell us what records were impacted and what basically like the quality level of the match. And again, I think that's something that the individual from ERIC can give you more details on, but just know that they do give us, they identify the matches, and then they tell us what the data points are that they matched on. And that's why they may identify a lot more records than we're comfortable actually pushing out to the counties because their matching criteria is not as strict as ours is in Texas.
So the number of data points that they match on relates to the quality of the match, I guess, right? So
I would agree with that, yes, sir. The other thing that's important to note is that Texas is a very big state. And some of our other member states to ERIC don't have some of the data concerns that we do in Texas by being a big state with a large population. And I'll give you an example. When you're looking at matches based on names and date of birth or, data points that are kind of broad like that, you may not get multiple matches in states like Connecticut, Rhode Island, states with a smaller population. In Texas, you're going to get a lot of matches. You'd be surprised how many John Smiths we have that have the same birth date.
Right.
And even for myself, like I looked myself up just to see how many Christina Adkins we have in Texas. We have 8. We have 4 that have the same first, middle, and last name.
Well, there's really only one in my book, but that's okay.
Thank you.
Just thought I'd throw that in there. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, right? I mean, there's
But-
a lot of people with similar names, even in the same zip code, even with the same birth date. So you don't want to cancel someone who's a
Correct,
legitimate voter.
Because we hear a lot of information, there's a lot of chatter out there about the number of records we get from Eric and how many cancellations it's resulted from. Getting a lot of records is great, but what we want are actionable matches. And given that Texas has, population numbers
Yep.
that lead to more duplicates like that, we want strict matching criteria because we want to make sure that what we push out, what's investigated, and what could ultimately result in a cancellation, we're pretty confident it's that voter. So that's why we have a stricter criteria for pushing data out to the counties than the broader matches that we get from Eric.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions? Representative Swanson, you've kind of been quiet on this. Okay, all right, I'm not going to prompt you, but that's all right, I'm just asking.
It all sounds good to me.
Ms. Atkins, a moment ago, you alluded to the issues with Eric, okay? What's your understanding as to what the issues are with Eric?
So there's a couple of broad things that have come up repeatedly. One, there was some concern with the participation of ex officio members on the board of Eric. Right now, all of the member states make up the board. So everyone that's a member gets a seat at the table and gets to vote on changes and reforms. There were some individuals on the board that were not member states. They were non-voting members, but they were there and participating in conversations and did have a role in, I think, getting Eric started and off the ground. That's been addressed. Those individuals, the ex officio members, are no longer on the board. In fact, the board voted to remove those positions from the board entirely. So that issue's been addressed. It is now, I would say, a member-run organization completely to a certain extent. Beyond that, the bigger issue is that participation in ERIC requires that you obtain certain reports and that you take certain actions. The one that's the most controversial is the eligible but unregistered report. This is the report we get from ERIC where they identify those individuals that are eligible for registration but not currently registered. To be able to obtain some of the other reports in ERIC, like voter participation, you have to do all of the different requirements. You have to complete the requirements of ERIC. You have to do what they're telling us to. It's part of the bylaws, part of the member agreement. And one of the things that we have to do is send out a postcard to all of the individuals that are eligible but unregistered. There is a lot of concern among different members within the Texas community, but I think even nationwide, about using taxpayer dollars to pay for voter registration efforts like that, where we're trying to solicit and promote voter registration. There's a big concern about that. There was a bipartisan working group with ERIC that made a number of recommendations to modify the bylaws, to modify the membership agreement, to make it so that individuals could pick and choose what reports or what things they obtained from ERIC, and it would basically make that mailer optional. Again, a bipartisan working group, red states and blue states, all came to the table, made these agreements, or made these recommendations. When this was voted on, it didn't pass. The recommendation to make these changes, to make it so that it was optional to take, for example, this eligible but unregistered mailer, those reforms did not pass. It required a supermajority. I would say the majority of states voted for the changes, but there was a small group that very passionately feel that all states should do this eligible but unregistered mailer. And so, I think the organization itself and many of the states participating in it have tried very hard to make the changes necessary to address some of the concerns that are out there in the community, but there are a handful of states that don't want to budge on that issue.
Has Texas been sending out that mailer?
We did initially because it was required to for our participation in ERIC. We have not sent it out since last year.
So how many times have we done it?
So we did one big initial mailer in 2020, and then we started doing it on a monthly basis because for cost reasons and for just a number of reasons, it made sense to do it when the data was a little bit more fresh rather than holding that data. And I believe it was, and I can get you the specific date for sure, but I think it was around November of 2022 where we stopped, November, December, right around that time frame, and we haven't done it since then.
Are those all the issues you're aware of with Eric?
Those are the big issues that are out there. You know, I always want to remind people that we do have a good matching program in Texas. We do get data from a lot of sources, and so, you know, we don't always push out the matches that Eric gives us because we already get some of the information from our Texas sources, and so, you know, it is providing data that we don't have, but there are things in Texas that we do have and that we work to obtain on our own.
Okay. Did you have a question? Yeah, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, so what is the mailer? Like, what's in it? Is it an application to register to vote?
It's a postcard that's sent to, so we don't actually send it to named individuals, we household it. So we send it, if a household has somebody that, you know, Eric has identified as registered, or I'm sorry, eligible but unregistered, they'll get this postcard, just a generic postcard to that household that says, you know, you are eligible, but it appears as though you're unregistered. You know, you can go to votetexas.gov for information on registration.
So it's not an actual...
No, it's not an actual application. Again, we don't have online voter registration in Texas, so it doesn't even take them to a URL where they can do that. It takes them to our website where they can get information on how to register. You know, it gives them the information on how to obtain an application if they want to register.
And so to get the list of eligible but unregistered, I guess that's cross-matched with people who are registered to vote, so those are all removed. Then they look maybe at DMV records or
Correct.
others and say, okay, in this household, there may be someone who is eligible based on the fact that they live in Texas and over 18 or whatever.
Yes, sir.
And then we send them a postcard that says, go to our website.
Yes, sir. That's what the mailer is.
Okay, all right, thank you. I don't know if you had something.
Thank you. And if there was one thing that you mentioned there, if you don't mind, I'd like to just clarify one thing. The testimony right before me made reference to information from about 16 to 18-year-olds. I just want to make it very clear on that. Our voter registration system is hard-coded that you cannot register somebody if they don't meet the age requirements.
Right.
So if we tried to put somebody in that was too young, they would not be able to register. Like,
So if they're 17, you're not going to send them?
they have to be 17 years and 10 months in order to go into the system. So just to be real clear, our voter registration system does not allow registration for anything younger than that.
Got it, thank
So-
you.
There she is. Representative
I didn't
Swanson.
want to disappoint you.
No, don't
Had to think of a question here. So do you have, well, two questions. Making up for before, but do you have concerns that you're sending cards to people who appear to be eligible, but perhaps they're not a citizen, or you don't realize they're a felon in some other state that's not part of ERIC? And maybe, are we pushing people to register because they think, well, I got a card from the Secretary of State, like that's the highest authority?
That's a fair point. I think that's where some of the criticisms of Eric are coming about because of that concern right there. I think that getting a mailer with the Secretary of State's name on there, is weighty compared to other mailers you might get. So I do understand the concerns and criticisms there. I will say that's one of the reasons that we household it. We don't put a person's name on there because, in part because of that, because we want to be cautious because there may be circumstances that we're not aware of.
Okay.
So we are, that's one of the reasons we do it that way, to be cautious.
Okay. And then there was some mention that perhaps the data is being kept and sold or used for things it's not supposed to be. Can you address that?
I'm not aware of that happening. I don't believe that's authorized by the member agreement
Okay.
and the bylaws, but I think, as I understand, there's somebody here from ERIC that can answer some specific questions on that.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Ms. Atkins, thank you very much.
Of course, you're welcome.
The chair calls Shane Hamlin. Mr. Hamlin, I show you are Shane Hamlin, that you're here on behalf of the Electronic Registration Information Center, and that you are neutral on the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Just to let everybody know, the chair intends to recess at the very latest at 5 till 9, because we have to go to the floor, okay? But I wanted to get through this particular witness. But I just wanted everybody to know that so that we can get to the floor in efficient manner. But go ahead, Mr. Hamlin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Smith, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Shane Hamlin. I'm the Executive Director of ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. I'm here to testify on House Bill 2809 to provide you with some basic information about how ERIC operates, answer any questions you may have. For the record, I am not here on behalf of the Secretary. You just heard Christina Adkins speak on behalf of the Secretary. ERIC is a 501c3 nonprofit membership organization currently comprised of state election officials from 31 states and the District of Columbia. Our mission is to help election officials maintain more accurate voter rolls and increase access to voter registration information for eligible citizens. We are a member-led, member-driven organization funded and governed by our members through the payment of dues. Members securely submit voter registration and motor vehicle department data to us. We are also authorized and certified to use official death data from the Social Security Administration, and we subscribe to national change of address data from the United States Postal Service. Using these 4 data sources, we provide our members with reports that identify inaccurate and out-of-date voter records, deceased voters, individuals who appear not to be eligible, who appear to be eligible but are not registered to vote, and possible cases of illegal voting. In compliance with federal and state laws, our members use these reports to contact voters for the purposes of updating their record, to remove ineligible voters and deceased voters from their rolls, and then they contact likely eligible but not yet registered individuals, as we heard in the earlier testimony. Possible cases of illegal voting are reviewed and investigated, and if found credible, they refer them to law enforcement for further investigation and possible prosecution. Since Texas joined, ERIC has provided, as you heard, about 4.2 million records. It may be out of date. I have some specific numbers on those if you're interested, but I think Christina's data is more reliable given their matching criteria. So I'd be happy to expand on any of these topics or answer any questions you have. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Burrows.
Are you wholly funded by dues-paying members, or do you actually receive outside contributions to help day-to-day operations?
We are wholly funded by dues-paying members.
Has that always been the case, or did you have any startup seed capital, things of that nature?
We did have startup funding. So as you may know, ERIC was founded by 7 states with assistance from Pew. It was created through a work group led by Pew.
When did
the initial startup costs, 2012 by Pew.
And is that the only time the Pew Charitable Trust has given donations to ERIC?
We received a grant, a one-time grant from them a few years ago for technology projects.
When was that?
2019.
All right. Is that the only outside funder who's actually contributed to ERIC is Pew?
Yes.
All right. And do we know who basically, was it a specific pass-through donation through Pew by somebody, or was it just, general funds that was, comprised of a bunch of different donations?
So our initial startup costs came from Pew, and I have talked with them about where the origins of that funding were. It has, I think, been publicized a couple of times. There are no other funders, if you're speaking of one individual in particular, one foundation in particular, that was not involved in funding ERIC in the beginning.
So what are we talking about?
If you're talking about funding from the Open Source Society or whatever George Soros' foundation is, it was not involved in the creation of ERIC.
And that's confirmed either in writing from Pew or?
Yes. From
Okay.
Pew, yeah.
And have you been able to publicize that information where Pew confirmed that did not come from them?
It is published, not by ERIC as an organization, but I have repeated this before multiple legislative committees and to multiple members of the media.
Okay, but that's coming from?
That's from Pew.
But did Pew basically certify that, publish it, anything like that?
They provided it in a fact-check article that has been published, yes.
Okay, where can I find that fact-check article?
I can follow up and give you a link.
Okay, but it is actually public information. They have publicly refuted it and
Yes.
said that is inaccurate.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's been concerns about the types of data, specifically the personal information. Obviously, there's social security numbers, there's addresses, there's birth dates. Are there any other more sensitive data that's included, like let's say social information, mental health? I mean, there's just a lot of conversation about the other data that it has. Could you talk to me and us a little bit about the actual information that's being used?
It's a really good question, thank you. We only use 4 and receive 4 data sources: voter registration data, DMV or DPS data, the NCOA data, and the death data from the Social Security Administration. We receive no other data. We have no other data, no medical history, no other personal sensitive data. We don't take social media data. We don't use any of that. We don't need it. We are a basic matching service that matches on those 4 data sets. There was some language in previous versions of our membership agreement among the reforms that the membership adopted 6 weeks ago. We repealed provisions of the membership agreement that were inoperable, but that referred to other data sources that members could submit to us. We never asked for those. States didn't submit them. We don't use them. There's one remaining provision in our membership agreement regarding Illinois and data from other agencies in Illinois, but we are not accepting that data from them. So I think that's probably the source of that misunderstanding.
Okay.
But again, just 4 data sources: voter reg, DMV, NCOA, death data.
Now, some of that data you mentioned, honestly, I could go online and buy too, right? Especially the change of address and all that kind of stuff. But maybe the other information like social security numbers and all of that, can you talk about how that is or isn't protected, made sure that it's secure, it's not maybe shared, transferred, or sold to other sources?
No, we don't sell data to any third party. We don't use or provide data for any partisan purposes. That'd be a violation of IRS code. We lose our 501c3 status, as well as violate the federal data protection laws that apply to the DPS data that we have. And that DPS data is in multiple reports. So those reports are protected under federal data protection laws, as well as the deceased report, which is protected under the federal death regulations as part of the 2013 Budget Act that authorized and required a certification program for that data. So we are very careful with the data we have, and we protect it, and we do not violate the laws that govern it. Does that answer?
It does. I guess.
Oh, you talked about how we protect the sensitive data.
Yeah, how do you protect the sensitive data, and where I'm assuming some of it you keep on either servers in-house?
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit, yeah. So the core protection for the driver's license numbers, the dates of birth, and the social security numbers is something called a cryptographic one-way hash. We provide this software to our members. They apply this cryptographic one-way hash, and it's discussed a little bit in the FAQs I handed out, and there's more detail on our website. They apply that algorithm, that software program, to those sensitive data elements. It renders them human. They're not readable to the human. Then they encrypt the entire file. They upload it to a secure server. They have access to no other members' data or reports, and we bring that off of the secure server into a secure environment where we hash those data elements again a second time. They can still be matched because everyone's using the same algorithm, and then we can produce the reports on demand.
When that's happening, since it's hashed and maybe double hashed at that point, right? Mm-hmm. What you're doing is you're comparing, if you're looking for maybe one state, a participant who maybe moved from one state to another, what you're doing essentially is creating a fingerprint from, let's say, people that live in Texas, and then you have similar fingerprints that are created, and then you're just matching if those fingerprints are the same, right? You're matching.
That is a good metaphor. And I can tell you, so the technical term is entity resolution. We're essentially identifying records that are associated with the same individual, and we're identifying differences in the 2 data sets, and those are essentially reported. So for example, on a cross-state report, which you talked about earlier, a Texas voter is on there. We're comparing your Texas registration records to every other ERIC member's driver's license and voter records. And where we identify a match where that Texas voter appears to have a driver's license or a voter registration in another state and it's more recent, then that voter ends up on the cross-state report.
That makes sense. And where's the data stored or held?
The data is stored in a secure commercial facility here in the United States on U.S. soil by an experienced company, not one of the big tech companies. Okay. I prefer not to provide the specific location for security reasons, but it is here in the U.S.
Okay.
And the vendor that we use for that undergoes annual SOC audits, SOC 1 and SOC 2, Type 1 and Type 2 audits, as well as other industry standard protections that they are required. I mean, they have banking data, school district data, healthcare data. They have data sets that are far more regulated than what we have.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Hamlin, I know we just have a few minutes here, but I want to kind of cut to the chase a little bit. How many member states did ERIC have at its height?
34.
How many does it have now?
32, but we will have 27 by the end of June.
And why is that? What's your understanding as to why that is?
Well, we have a number of states that are in resignation status. We have a long withdrawal period. But I think Christine Adkins did a good job of highlighting the 2 main concerns the members had.
Yes.
The non-voting board members, which have been repealed, and members a majority of the members who have left before the vote to remove the non-voting board seats. They opted to leave in between votes taken on it. There was to get too far into the weeds, but there was a vote taken in February, it failed, another vote taken in March, it passed. So some states left in between those two votes. And then some states have, even though they joined ERIC, knowing what the requirements were, and they've been in ERIC for a number of years, including doing that eligible but unregistered mailing, they have over time come to the conclusion that they don't want to be forced to do that mailing anymore, and they opted to leave. I think the other concerns that were expressed more generally was just data sharing and data protection provisions, which were also significantly clarified and I'd say strengthened in March as well. We didn't really make significant changes because they weren't weak, they were strong, but we did clarify for the public primarily, but also for our members, what laws apply to the data we use, how we protect them, how ERIC will or will not share data, et cetera.
And so in a year, where do you think ERIC will be in terms of membership?
Well, we're still focused on our mission and delivering quality, actionable data to our members. We're still recruiting new states. Chin up, eyes forward, we got work to do, and we want to help states keep their voter rolls accurate and up to date, and that is what we're focused on. It's unfortunate states are leaving because it does diminish the value overall, but ERIC wasn't born at 34 states. We were born at 7. We got to 34, and we're going to keep working to ensure that states understand the real value of ERIC, to explain to legislators and others that are concerned and want to hear the facts that ERIC is in fact an effective tool to keep voter rolls up to date and register new voters, if that's what a state wants to do.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Members, at this time, we still have 13 witnesses left on this bill. So at this time, the chair leaves House Bill 2809 pending. Is there any objection? The chair hears none. We will take this back up again and when we return from the floor. The chair moves that the committee stand in recess until final adjournment recess of the House or during bill referral if permission is granted. Is there objection? Hearing none, the motion prevails. The committee stands in recess.